2018. Thomas, the first tweet reads, Justice Roberts can say what he wants, but the Ninth Circuit is a complete and total disaster. It's out of control, has a horrible reputation, is overturned more than any circuit in the country, 79%, and is used to get an almost guaranteed result. Judges must not legislate security, the tweet continues, and safety at the border or anywhere else. They know nothing about it and are making our country unsafe. Our great law enforcement professionals must be allowed to do their job. If not, there will be only bedlam, chaos, injury, and death. We want the Constitution as written.
It's an honor to try to decode the Trump tweets. Thank you, Betsy, for inviting me to do so. And President Trump, if we're wrong, please just send out another tweet tomorrow to correct us. Now, and I know you're following us as closely as we're following you. So he didn't say here what he really meant. What he really meant is the stupid judge in the Ninth Circuit, Judge Tigar, Tigar, I call him Tiger. His name is probably Tijar or something. But anyway, Tigar. He is a Mueller manipulated federal thug. And he is a placed federal thug, like all of them. And let's remember that, yes, Trump just placed 84 of them, and he's got 70 more set up for the 120 openings in the federal court systems at this moment of the 856 positions. And he's going to continue to do so if he's reelected, and will probably place more crooked. Remember, they're all crooked. Okay, they're all crooked. There's no such thing as a judge that gets placed that is not crooked. That judge, he or she, is partisan, is biased from the get-go. They're considered liberal or a conservative, which means Democrat or Republican, no matter what they say.
Globalists or nationalists.
Correct. That's
what the bottom line is here, folks. The globalists are at a war with America. We saw that with the California fires. Now, the media isn't going to tell you the politicians or even the bureaucrats, because you see, they too are globalists. They're all working to take down America. And who's left are us patriots out here. And we need to stand up and start being vocal and saying no more.
This is Trump engaging in a war directly with what we have been calling the fake justice system. I'm so glad he's taken it up and he's directly confronted them. Now, he's done this before because these lower federal courts, sometimes they start in a district court and they go to a circuit appellate court and then they have to go to the Supreme Court. I'm going to explain this because this is absolutely critical. We have been writing about this for months and months, and we have tried to bring this to the light so that we can say this system has to end. And we have a way it's going to end. We're going to tell you the quick way to take care of this system. What Trump is saying is the second that any filing happens in a federal court, you already know the outcome because you filed it before a judge, or were allowed to file it before a judge, that you already know is on your side, either a Democrat or a Republican. It's as simple as that, folks. And when somebody files and gets into a real case, like with Judge Chutkan or Judge Leon, they just send in the replacements. Judge Contreras, pulled out of the Mueller investigation just from his superiors, gets recused from above, but wasn't recused during the case. I'm sorry. This is the most beautiful example of Trump trolling someone and them being so stupid. And I'm sorry to have to say that John Roberts, he may be a great thinker, but he's an idiot. Because what he just did is he proved that he is not unbiased. He is absolutely biased. And he absolutely has an opinion. And he did not reserve his judgment. He is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, the head person in charge of all the lower federal courts, all 94 of them. And guess what? He is the one doing the corruption.
Oh, listen, Justice Roberts is so darn corrupt. You know, there was that Lita versus Facebook case that he heard at the Supreme Court level, and he never recused himself and never told anybody he was holding huge amounts of Facebook stock. So, of course, he made out by making sure that Lita continues to this day to be unpaid for the work that they gave the government. Justice Roberts, I mean, look at his Obamacare fiasco, turning this corrupt, unconstitutional thing called Obamacare into a tax. So Justice Roberts has a lot of
baggage, skeletons in the closet, his adopted children, the fact that he's on so medicated sometimes he doesn't know where he's at, he's confused, so on and so forth, and he looks like he's just this hero. He is a perfect example. He was appointed by Baby Bush. He is absolutely a conservative. From the moment you are elected appointed by a very biased partisan president.
Well, if he's a conservative, why is he making this kind of statement to defend a totally corrupt Obama judge?
Because he went to Obama's side. Remember, Obama, during his State of the Nation, chewed out Judge Alito, and Judge Alito hasn't come to another one since because of his judgment and his written judgment on a particular case. So when the President of the United States, after the Supreme Court makes its opinion, then hammers on them to try to get them to change and then gets Judge Roberts to change, Obama got John Roberts to change and allow Obamacare, one of the biggest fiascos in American history, a tax for something that basically caused you to have to spend, in some cases, 10, 100 times more than you were spending before, mandated by the government with a penalty on it.
You mean this sleazebag of a Supreme Court judge put his own self-interest before millions of Americans and their health?
Yes, he did. And he went from being conservative to liberal to do so.
Or he went from pretending that he wasn't a globalist to being an outright globalist.
Yes, now let's look at what Trump says here, that these are overturned. First off, the 9th District is overturned more than any other district. They're going to argue with that, but they can't argue with that. There's 29 judges in the 9th District. All you have to do is look at the math, folks. The 9th District has 79% rejection and overturning of their decisions at the Supreme Court. Okay? If I was 80% wrong in my job, I would be fired after how many times? So I say, if you get overturned by a higher court 3 times, you're out. No more putting judges in place for life and trying to impeach them, which you can't. So forget that. So now let's look at just the district courts. The district court decisions for the federal court system are 69%, around 70% overturned when they go to the appellate, to the circuit courts. And then those courts are overturned 79%, 80% when they go to the Supreme Court. In other words, we have a broken system. This system is the worst imaginable. Who is going to do any business with anyone who says, I get it wrong? 70-80% of the time.
What kind of business would be left in business if 79% of their product had to be sent back for flaws in material or workmanship?
This is fake justice, and the entire federal system exists to basically determine who has jurisdiction in the states. That's why it started. Remember, the only position that should exist is the Supreme Court. After that, it's up to the Congress. The Congress gets to determine other federal courts. But those federal courts were determined in basically a race between the states to gain jurisdiction one state over another. And so it turned out to be a political machination that has become the greatest nightmare ever. Now, here's the solution. Very simple. First off, get good judges. If their judgments are overruled so much, let's set it, let's 50%. If they're 51% wrong, they're out. Okay? Simple as that. Or 3 mistakes, 3 strikes, you're out. Let's do it the American way. Okay, let's also say no more IRS. If you only pay taxes when you're buying something, then even George Soros has to pay taxes. The hedge fund managers have to pay taxes.
Well, the IRS...
Stocks have to pay taxes on the 1.4 quadrillion spent on the New York Stock Exchange, which would mean there would have to be no more taxes at all if we wanted to do it that way, but certainly no more payroll taxes as a debt on Americans for war debt.
Well,
that's
the
what we're paying.
IRS is just an extortion outfit for the bankers and the globalists to, keep American people, that we can never really own everything and we can't save because we're constantly feeding their system.
Precisely. Why is it that you never own your land? You can own your land for 40 years and then not pay the taxes and they take it from you. Think of that. You never own it. In other words, property was left out of some of the considerations, particularly at the federal court level, in that IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, can come and dock your pay, take your money, take your land, take your house, take everything.
Well, the IRS was created at the same time that the Federal Reserve was, which is also, let's just take this one statement here by itself. We want the Constitution as written, and there's no provision for a Federal Reserve and an IRS and federal income taxes.
Yeah, that's a fact.
And a lot of other stuff. And we need to get senior executive service out of our government, because what's happened is they've overlaid themselves into the bureaucracy. They give all the contracts to Serco. We've got vast amounts. What did Chris tell us the other day? That Serco has its own international navy?
That's what we're being told. We're going to interview a friend of Christopher Strunk's to talk about that. I believe his name is John Levy. But now, going back to this, if there was no IRS taxes through payroll or through end-of-the-year payments for a debt that you accrued to the United States federal government, okay, you strike a huge part of these courts out of existence. They don't need to exist. Now, mind you, there are federal courts for trade, for the veterans, for the U.S. Armed Services. There's all kinds of federal courts. Fine, that's no problem. Keep them in D.C. Keep the Supreme Court in D.C. And keep the Supreme Court justices' mouths shut if you have to put duct tape over it. Because the second they open their mouth, they prejudice any case that they're referring to. So at this point, John Roberts needs to recuse himself from any more changes of judges in any lower courts below him. Why? Because he just said there is no such thing as partisanship, which that's a lie, and that shows that he just got involved in making lying statements about a system that is so corrupt everybody knows it, and he's now coming out to fight the president. This is a fight against the president. This is a battle that is engaged. He has no way to defend that circuit court, the Ninth Circuit Court. There's no defense for it.
Well, some people say that what he did was he strategically removed himself from the conversation, because now he'll have to recuse himself on any kind of issues like that, which will leave the court at a 4-4 split. And so that means the decision would go down to the lower court. What do you say about that?
He needs to be impeached. If he did it on purpose,
he needs to
impeach
be impeached
him.
for a lot more than just this. His background is full of trash.
We need to see, as Christopher Strunk said to me the other day, something so sad. We need to see something happen that he said isn't going to happen. He said none of these people are going to be convicted in a U.S. federal court. None of the federal criminals are going to be convicted in a federal court. Look at Andrew McCabe in his hidden little impaneled grand jury. Nobody could be any more guilty. He had 5 investigations on him, and he's probably going to get away with nothing more than not having candor, which is perjury. Should be 5 years for each time. That's 15 years. He's going to get away with whatever.
He should have the full-blown treason charges against him.
He is so treasonous in Uranium One, he conducted the whole thing with Robert Mueller's direction, and then later Comey's hiding it. So what we're talking about is the federal court system must be completely revamped. Now, can it be? Only if Congress, after the next 2 years of embarrassing themselves with wanting an open borders, lawlessness, DACA, illegal aliens voting.
Let's get to the point. They rigged the elections. We showed how they did it in the cyberspace world. That's how all of these districts have been flipped after the election day to becoming all blue. And so until we get rid of this egregious election rigging, they're going to hold power in Congress. So don't expect Congress to do anything.
Well, what we can hope is that with the second election of Trump, that he'll get 1 or 2 more Supreme Court justices so that the rigged system can be rigged for conservatives who want the truth, who want to stop war,
I don't want it
who
rigged
want to have
at all.
borders. Well, it has to be rigged. There's no way around it. The entire system was created to be rigged. And when you see a Supreme Court Chief Justice attacking the president because the president was pointing out that the Supreme Court justice wasn't doing his job, because now this is going to have to go with another case that may go to a different circuit court, appellate court, instead of the Ninth, and so Trump could go like Obama did. Here's the way that it worked with Obama. Any time that Obama wrote an executive order, or he had 5 other ways to write them, but anytime he wrote something like DACA, which was an order to Homeland Security not to do their job, not to deport these people, the judges always ruled against him. What did he do? He did more. And he brought another case in another court with a judge that was on his side. And then it would get confused. He wouldn't want it to go to the Supreme Court because he knew what he was doing was illegal. But he did this for 8 years. And he played the game of using these partisan, biased federal judges and placing their cases before exactly who they know will be on their side. And he played that for 8 years. Now it's being used against Trump. But hey, guess what? Trump has appointed 84 judges, more than any president so far, ever. He's going to appoint another 70. And after that, when he's reelected, he'll appoint another 100. And after that, the extreme kind of illness that affects even conservative judges on the Supreme Court, that is the demon rats, who are now socialists, the liberals, this progressive party that has now become Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's fascist movement, with Bernie not being socialist enough in his last campaign, so now he has to become a fascist. Oh no, he's going to change up and be whatever Soros tells him to be. But the point is, what we're dealing with here is President Trump doesn't even have to pay any attention to these judgments. He can simply put it back into the court and continue to ignore even a stay from the Ninth District. That's not a big deal. But he doesn't. But he lets people know that when these judges do this, people die. People will die. That means that these judges are murderers, and they know it. They want to put a stay on the president doing his job, which is to secure the borders. How do you put a stay? That's like putting a stay on a president during a war that he can't drop bombs.
So then this would mean that, Judge Roberts, we need to see your front door of your home unlocked and wide open. Everybody's going to come in, because that's what's happening here at the border.
Absolutely. And they are not allowed to write law. The courts can only interpret law, and even then it will go to a higher court to interpret it if they misinterpret it, which they obviously do 60, 70, 80% of the time.
The next tweet reads, "It's a mean and nasty world out there. The Middle East in particular, this is a long and historic commitment, and one that is absolutely vital to America's national security." Secretary Pompeo, I agree 100%. I guess that was a quote from Pompeo. In addition, many billions of dollars of purchases made in U.S., big jobs, and oil. And just a reminder for everybody, if you want to read these tweets and follow along, just check that link in the description box.
What he's talking about is the death of Khashoggi. Khashoggi's uncle was responsible, one of the people responsible for 9/11. After 9/11 and thousands of Americans being killed by the Saudi Arabians, Daddy Bush went and lived in the palace of King Saud. Remember that George Baby Bush got all of his money for his oil fiascos from the Saud family. Let's remember that's the bin Laden family also. Let's remember that they are murderous, horrifying, fascist. There's no name for it. When they find someone guilty, they publicly hang them and make sure everybody can see the hanging body, or they'll chop their head off. Theft in those countries is you get your hand chopped off. Lying, wrong type of lying to the wrong person, get your tongue cut out, to this very day. So let's not play games here. When you want to say that the president should be held accountable for the death of a murderous bastard, anyone in the Adnan Khashoggi is responsible for more deaths than I can count. He was the largest arms trader in the world during the entire Bush administration and after.
Don't you see the CIA written all over this?
Oh, it's totally... Here's what happened. Of course, the crown prince killed the Khashoggis. He'll kill all of them. Why shouldn't he? They're his enemy. And they're liars. And Khashoggi was working for Washington Post, one of the biggest lying propaganda presses in the West.
With Jeff Bezos, another CIA placement?
You must be kidding. The Khashoggi went to Istanbul to try to get permission for his wedding was so stupid that he deserved to be killed. I'm sorry to have to say that. But he was a murderous. He supported Adnan Khashoggi, his uncle, running the Ministry of Truth in Saudi Arabia. And then he turned on Saudi Arabia and didn't expect to get killed? obviously he hasn't been watching the news and what the Crown Prince has been doing. He hangs people upside down until he turns over the secret numbers to their offshore accounts. Why did he think that he wouldn't be killed? And by the way, anybody else like him, you better get ready because you'll be murdered too. But generally, they don't like to do that in another country. That's the reason they chopped him up to bring him back there so they could revel in the pieces of his dead body. They like to do it in front of the people who they insulted. You can insult someone. You can say one wrong word in Saudi Arabia and it is the death sentence. So don't tell me how Trump should be all sad over
But what they want to do
death.
is start some kind of war or something, with this. And people are awake to this kind of nonsense that the CIA and the FBI have been playing on Americans for years, all this false flag stuff. And so now we're just calling it out as BS right when it happens.
And how about the people being killed in Iran? The people now being, the battle has began again in Syria. How about the people dying there? What about the 750,000 Uyghur people in northwest China who were brought in for re-education? They called it vocational training. 1 million, actually. 1 million are brought in, 750,000 died. Now, because of facial recognition, new dragonfly technology created by Eric Schmidt for China, the totalitarian communist government, they are using facial recognition in the same area, the Uyghur people, and by the look on their face, they determine whether they are Muslim fascists. So they just gathered up 1 million more of them. How many do you think will die? And yet people want us to be nice to China? No, President Trump is in a war with China. And China, I hope, loses. He doesn't want China to lose because he still wants them to be a vassal of ours, making things for us, but no longer cheating, lying, putting radioactive material in it, and stealing our IP and all the other things China's been doing since day one. So this tariff battle, as he was laughing in his last presser that I heard, we're making $25 billion off of the tariffs right now. I mean, China never paid us a penny before, so I think I'm doing pretty darn good, the president says. That's the beginning. We will be paying. There will be zero tariffs on both sides. And when that happens, the whole world changes, and American currency comes back, the attacks of China on us stop, and the murderous dragonfly social credit system that they have placed in China with Eric Schmidt's help and also Facebook's help through WhatsApp and many other social media and John Breyer and all the other criminals, Hillary Clinton in Shanghai. China is the example of what we're going to become, America, unless we stand up right now as Trump is doing. He's fighting the Supreme Court. He's fighting the mainstream media. He's fighting the U.S. Federal Reserve. He's fighting the currency attacks from China and Russia. He's fighting the tariff attacks, basically, the trade wars. We're in the biggest trade war, and we're winning. We've won the majority already, and the rest are falling into place. So, I'm sorry, don't tell me about how Trump is a bad person because he doesn't want to put sanctions on Saudi Arabia, who just started working with Iran. You know why they did that? You know why Saudi Arabia just started opening talks with Iran? Because of this. So, if sanctions are put on Saudi Arabia over Khashoggi's death, then Saudi Arabia is going to do business with Iran. That's how serious these people in Saudi Arabia are, because they're working hand in glove now with Israel, as Trump said also during that presser. But anyway, I don't really want to hear them accusing Trump of being a bad president because he doesn't put sanctions on Saudi Arabia, who he just basically did put sanctions on by saying either you lower your oil prices or else, and he did. And now Trump is being blamed because oil prices in America are too low and people are going out driving too much during the Thanksgiving break and there's congestion. So therefore, Trump did another bad thing by lowering the price of oil through telling Saudi Arabia to do so, which no president before ever did.
If we would introduce thorium into our energy basket, oil prices would go even lower.
There would be no nuclear. In 1 year, we could retrofit all nuclear reactors with thorium.
And this is important because the next tweet is, this is the coldest weather in the history of Thanksgiving Day Parade in New York City and one of the coldest Thanksgivings on records. And what they haven't told you in all this global warming nonsense that they've been preaching for the last decade is that the earth is getting ready to go through a great cooling cycle, and we are going to need a lot of heat, especially in areas where perhaps we were once growing crops that we won't have this long cycle, growth cycle. So we may need a way to have greenhouses and such like that, which means we're going to have inexpensive ways of getting energy. And I am going to continue to look at GALT and thorium as a solution to petrochemicals.
Oh, absolutely, Betsy. And I'm so glad you nail that and you bring that up, because I so often forget that many of these problems are so easily solved that I forget to repeat them for people. But, the nuclear threat and the nuclear waste, that's all imaginary.
Yes.
Just like the lie of climate change. Yes, climate's changing. You need to observe the sun. The sun has no sunspots right now. That means we're in not an 11-year cycle, not a 22-year sun cycle. We're in a Maunder cycle, a 280-year cycle, and we are entering a mini ice age. That's a fact. And anybody who would simply believe the government lies, well, then you're still going to be out there with the people in Hollywood and the Obamas and the Netflix people telling you those lies. And I heard him say it just the other day, I think it was 2 days ago, Obama trying to convince us of climate change. He doesn't even know what to say. Okay, we have historic cold winters. We've had historic weather everywhere, historic hurricanes, historic everything. What do you think is going on, folks? Go back 280 years. You'll find that the oceans can change their the ocean pattern of the 9 ocean currents can be changed in a month. And when that happens, that changes the weather. The sun changes the 9 ocean currents. And the salination, that the heat of those 9 ocean currents determines the salination of the ocean, which determines the all weather. So anyone who wants to tell you that human beings are affecting weather, they're just stupid.
But the reason that you're not going to hear about thorium and GALT is because the globalists, oh my goodness, this would ruin their gravy train, because they're getting a lot of money with you believing that the only way to get fuel efficiency or heat or any of this is through their petrochemicals. So you're not going to hear about it. Now, in the link below, I've got 2 really great articles so that you can educate yourself about this technology.
What I meant by that is carbon footprints. We can eat carbon dioxide. We need carbon dioxide. Without carbon dioxide, the whole earth dies. And the cycle of carbon dioxide is being looked at completely wrong. It was to be a new international currency. And that's the reason that the people who are willing to just throw themselves down as if they're going to die if we don't go to the carbon footprint new currency, which is an international currency derived through the Paris Accord, which would make Al Gore one of the richest men in the world, which would make Obama rich, would make the Clintons rich, would make all the people who bought into this, who said that their lives depended upon it and our lives depended upon it, they're all making money off of it. The Arctic has more ice in it now. There was 2 years where it was really low, and now it's back to historic levels. The Antarctic is actually bigger than ever before. So anyone who tells you otherwise, like a new report just came out, and it came out from the U.S. government, stating the same old lies. Those lies were based upon false temperature statistics that are so wrong that from the moment that Trump took office, one report after the next has come out debunking them nonstop. So that there's a government report that comes out that says climate, that the earth is still heating up, and that we need the CO2 footprint currency. Oh my gosh. That is coming out shows that the people who were paid all that money to tell those lies in universities and in government agencies are SES members. They're the bureaucracy, and they just keep telling the lies. Because, folks, when you look at the statistics, that was one of the most pathetically formed lies that we've actually heard in the last few decades. So anyone who would believe that would literally believe anything. The earth is freezing up. Look at the ice in Greenland. Look at the ice in the Arctic, the ice in the Antarctic. Ocean levels, no, they have not gone up. They have actually gone down.
The next tweet gets back into judicial activism again. You want to continue to talk about that? Okay. Our highly trained security professionals are not allowed to do their job on the border because of the judicial activism and interference by the Ninth Circuit. Nevertheless, they are working hard to make America a safer place, though hard to do when anybody filing a lawsuit wins.
The only thing I want to say to add to what we've said before is, first off, underscored, second off, that fake justice here is showing who it is. Just like the fake Department of Justice, the fake FBI, the fake CIA, the fake State Department. Now we're getting to the fake NSA, the fake Director of National Intelligence. All of those were all fake. Fake intelligence communities, people who were all in service of the Democratic Party.
Well, when you say fake, let's just be really specific about it. What we're saying is that these people and institutions have infiltrated our government and are actually working against America. They are the enemy. That is what is meant by the enemy within. And they have spent decades, if not hundreds of years, infiltrating themselves in the American system to the point that that's why you can read the Constitution and scratch your head and go, well, how come we're not following that? Because they got rid of the Constitution a long time ago to run what they're doing in D.C. now.
Oh, the bureaucratic status quo couldn't care less about the Constitution. They consider it archaic. They're like Ocasio, who doesn't even know there is a Constitution. And if there was one, she'd want to change it. Or she would think that it's a boat that she could go for a ride on, the USS Constitution. She doesn't know anything. She doesn't have a fifth grade civics education, and yet she is in the Congress telling the president what to do. Now we have the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court telling the president what to do. He told them, keep your nose out of the business of border security. It's not even your domain. And first off, you're not supposed to be writing law. You're supposed to interpret law. And here, so what he's saying is judicial activism. And what I was saying is John Brennan and the other SES members in the intelligence community, the leaders of those communities, the senior executive service members, also in the military, they worked directly for Obama to get Hillary elected. That's what I meant. Not that they're all fake, but certainly their leadership was. Comey, he didn't prosecute anybody. He only covered the crimes of the people he was there to cover. He was a lawyer fixer.
I mean, like, is it in your face yet, people, that nobody has had a public trial from Hillary on down to all the minions that were supporting her? All you have from the FBI is cover up. All you have from Congress is cover up.
And the judicial activism. Look at the way the Podesta was covered up by taking out the previous judge and inserting his best friend, Judge Leon. That's John Podesta's best friend. So the Podesta $12 million to the Fusion GPS that paid for the Russian dossier just got swept under the judicial fake justice rug. Same thing with Imran Awan, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the whole guilt of the Democratic National Committee and Hillary Clinton. They appoint Judge Chutkan, a nice Obamaite. And yes, I'm sorry, Chief Justice Roberts, I can tell you the outcome of any federal court by simply looking up the history of that judge. And I'll tell you what, Chief Justice Roberts, I guarantee that you have an offshore account that you're being paid.
Yeah.
That's a fact.
Yeah.
That's a fact. And we're going to find it. And if you open your mouth one more time, we're going to sick our 250 researchers on you. We're going to find out your offshore accounts. You're probably in the Panama Papers to begin with. But no doubt you are exactly where all the rest of them are. And we know where they are. And we know about your accounts. And we know that you're paid under the table for your decisions. Do you think we don't know that Soros paid you to go for Obamacare? So that we would destroy American medical insurance? People have been put into the worst destitute in American history because of Obamacare. Does anybody want to notice that?
Are you saying that Justice Roberts is himself an enemy of America?
He is obviously, at first, a Bushite and a Reaganite.
Well, Bush is an enemy of America.
Thank you very much.
I mean, let's look at 9/11. Him and Dick Cheney and Rumsfeld and all of them, they planned the event we call 9/11. They killed Americans. Then they went off and killed more Americans and people in Afghanistan and all over the world. These are the people that the globalists are.
I can throw you any question to the Supreme Court and tell you what the vote will be. Anyone can. And there'll be one vote that may be a swing vote, and that's the vote that is the vote that holds out till the end and is paid the most in their offshore account. I hope people understand this.
That you've got Ruth Ginsburg up there, ancient woman, can hardly keep her eyes open through any event, and she's still sitting on the Supreme Court.
These people do not even write their own judgments in most cases. You have people who are on the Supreme Court who've never tried a single case. They've never even been a lawyer presenting a case. They've never defended a case. These are simply political appointees. It's a corrupt system from the get-go. I will allow them, in my imagination, to, once the IRS is destroyed, and I mean destroyed and annihilated, just like the U.S. Federal Reserve, because those are just taxing systems on Americans, which don't need to exist. Tax the people spending money in the stock market. That will give you more taxes than we create through payroll taxes. Tax the people who, like MERS, who are stealing $40.5 billion each year from state counties.
Go into that just for a bit, because we're getting ready to do a show on that. This is very important.
Well, you see, here's the deal. There are tax-free clubs like the stock market and the commodities exchange, the derivative exchanges, and when you do default swaps and when you're buying longs and shorts, that's all betting. Now, unfortunately, $210 quadrillion worth of real estate, about 70% of all mortgages in America are held by one electronic computer. That the people who own the New York Stock Exchange bought that computer program for $80.5 billion not long ago. And now all of the subprime bundled mortgages, plus all bundled mortgages that are part of MERS, the Mortgage Electronic Registration System, are basically, they're gambled with on the stock market. And so the company that owns the stock market owns the MERS, which owns the e-note rights to print titles and deeds for about 70 to 80%, if you include commercial. So let's call it 80% of all real estate in America. The e-notes are owned by MERS, and those are traded on the New York Stock Exchange, and that is a tax-free zone, remember. They only pay at the end of the year. 1.4 quadrillion. Everyone who is betting and winning on the stock market, and I don't believe in any gambling. If you're going to gamble, you need to pay at the moment that you're betting your money. You see, if I want to bet $1,000, and I need to pay whatever percentage you pay as a standard flat rate. No more payroll taxes, folks. Then you wouldn't need an IRS. The states would collect it. There would be no more federal courts determining which Paul Manafort and all those people, those are tax issues. The only thing Robert Mueller has found is he got people who supposedly lie because he had their transcripts from surveilling them illegally beforehand and then held them accountable for their exact words. So that's why Flynn, Papadopoulos, and others, I think that's how Gates is getting off. And a few others is to simply say that they lied to Robert Mueller. They didn't lie. He tricked them. And so what is Gates? And what are Gates and Manafort being charged with? Tax evasion. Those are federal crimes that have nothing to do with that particular impaneling of that grand jury or this particular special counsel. It is basically a regulation. It is not a law. And we can ignore what Robert Mueller says. It is nothing more than political. So when you talk about people in their homes, here's the deal, folks. When you go to remortgage, here's what I suggest. Remortgage your home. Ask to see the e-note on who is the holder of your deed or your title, and when they can't produce it, do not pay the person servicing your mortgage because they don't own it. They can't prove they own it. And then you don't have to pay another dime. Just don't move out of your house.
Well, I know you're going to do a big show on this one. You've got somebody on the ground who's going to be working with you on it. So let's save that. I know it's exciting. Anything you wanted to conclude before we move to the next one?
Tax-free nonsense. There should be no more tax-free exempt status for the Catholic Church because that their racketeering of pedophilia is pervasive.
Yeah, because you see, if you're a priest in the Catholic Church, or I guess imagine anywhere, and you commit these horrific crimes against children, the Catholic Church protects you. And accordingly, that means you parishioners out there who belong to these Catholic churches, that your priests are running around committing horrific acts against children, you are also complicit because you're on notice. We know that this is happening, and you're allowing your priests to run around to do this.
You need to close your churches down, and you need to convict those people, and you need to put them through the same justice system that the rest of us are put through, not move them to the Vatican to be questioned and then put out into
or move them around to other parishes.
Yes, to commit the same crime somewhere else.
To other children. And it's gone on too long. And citizens of America, it is time to call out these nasty priests and what they're doing to our children.
And these tax-exempt organizations, these churches, 184 fronts, you could call them, Catholic, Lutheran fronts, handled tens of billion, almost $100 billion, $80 billion a year it was, almost $100 billion a year that we gave for refugees. And it went to tax-free organizations who then stole the money, didn't even give it to the refugees come up missing. The federal government is exactly like these tax-free organizations. They think they're exempt from state laws, they think they're above state laws, they think they're above all laws, and they always defer to federal courts so that they can get their way when they are feds themselves. Now let me just point something out. Oh, we aren't there yet. Sorry, I was going to jump to the next
Okay, now let's wrap this up. The next two are Republicans and Democrats must come together finally with a major border security package, which will include funding for the wall. After 40 years of talk, it's finally time for action. Fix the border for once and for all now. And then the last one today, really good criminal justice reform has a true shot at major bipartisan support. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and Senator Schumer have a real chance to do something so badly needed in our country, already passed with big vote in House, would be a major victory for all.
Okay, let me read between the lines. We lost 40 Republican seats. People are freaking. No, don't freak. Those were the rats jumping off the ship. Those were the non-MAGAs on both sides. Those were the criminals. Those were the big, ugly, nasty California wharf rats. The only ones left are the biggest wharf rats. They're as big as a dog, and those are the ones still leading the Democratic Party. So don't worry. They're now showing themselves to be enemies of the state because they want lawlessness. They want no borders. They want criminals. They want ISIS to come in through our southern borders, drugs, human trafficking.
They are globalists who want to destroy America.
Absolutely 100%. So these people are going to show who they are in the Congress. They're going to show they're the enemies of the people, and there's going to be such a landslide in the next election, which will then create the ability to move forward. But guess what? Had the Republicans won the Republicans won the Congress, we still wouldn't get borders because there's still too many Republicans who are demon rats. They are liberal, progressive, fascist globalists. And don't forget that. So right now, they all get to show who they are. Everyone from Maxine Waters, who can't add 2 + 2, going to be in charge of the finances. Pelosi, who doesn't remember who the president is, creating a charge against that president, doesn't even know who he is, but she's going to bring 84 subpoenas against him, but doesn't know his name, can't remember who is the president, and her teeth keep falling out of her head as she's speaking, but she's got that big gavel, so she feels very powerful. So let me just say one more thing about that. The Democrats are criminal racketeers. They are enemies. They are basically supporting George Soros, Venezuela, China, and Russia to pay mercenaries to attack us on our southern borders where there is a war with Mexico. And anyone who doesn't see this cannot be a politician who is awake and concerned about their constituency because we are in grave danger. 22 million illegal